Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world. Teamwork isn't just nice to have in business, it's the undisputed competitive advantage. When your team members work as a unified force, your whole operation benefits through higher productivity, thriving creativity, and unstoppable momentum. Welcome to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast, where we share with you strategies and tactics to help you develop game-changing teams so that you and your business can make a real difference in the world. So welcome back to Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton and I'm your host and guide for the next 20 minutes or so. And really excited to be here today because I really wanted to share with you some of the latest research that I've been reading around teamwork. And on a topic that we haven't actually touched about, which is all about working in remote or hybrid teams. And I'm pretty sure that we can all agree that the whole landscape of work has changed, pretty much fueled by the pandemic. Prior to COVID, there were so many of my clients and friends and colleagues who were asking their bosses if they could work from home more often. And always the answer was no. We absolutely need you in the office 5 days a week. We can't operate in any other way. And then, of course, we got hit with COVID and everyone literally overnight was forced to work from home. In some ways, I think that's one of the blessings of COVID because it actually showed organizations that it is possible for people to work remotely and to still have a productive, successful business. And I particularly think about some of my clients in the accountancy sectors or the legal sections who were just totally averse to the working from home principle and now embracing it pretty fully. And of course, right now, there are a number of different views on remote working. Some companies fully embracing it and everyone's working remotely. Some companies that feel and are trying to force people to come back into the office every single day. And then we've got that hybrid version where people are coming in for a number of days during the week. And what's really interesting to me is the fact that when we are working in this hybrid environment, the need to collaborate is even more important. I think what we have forgotten and missed is that when we're all together in the office, then you learned through, as I say, you learned through osmosis. And any of you that will be familiar, that's a biology term, osmosis, is that you absorb the information just from being in the environment of everyone else. And I certainly know when I started my career, that's the way I learned. I was sitting in the office, I'd hear other people talking on the telephone or having conversations, and I'd pick up gems of wisdom about how to deal with that particular situation. And the problem is with people working remotely, we've lost that ability, that informal learning. You didn't know you were learning it. You just heard something and then you took it on board and maybe you'd action it. But of course, if you're sitting in your home office in whatever shape or form that takes, you don't get the luxury of hearing other people have these conversations and to be able to learn from. And actually, I think this is becoming quite a challenge for some sectors of industry, particularly perhaps some of those more technical areas where it was just by sitting next to somebody and seeing how somebody else did something that you learned the skills and gained the expertise in how to deal with a similar situation. So that learning from osmosis has pretty much disappeared in this hybrid environment. And we do have challenges with collaboration. And how do we keep our teams connected and working collaboratively and becoming really cohesive when everyone is really disparate? So that's the topic I really want to talk about today. And it is fueled by a piece of research that's just recently come out from Gallup, because they studied 2,877 workers in the US. And what their research revealed were that there were many opportunities to improve the plans, practices, and feedback of hybrid teams. And actually, when I think about it, the skills required to lead hybrid teams are quite different from the skills that we need to lead in a face to face environment. And yet, many organizations haven't invested in upskilling their leaders in this fashion. So, how can we help boost a hybrid team productivity in today's world? And so, what Gallup is suggesting are that there are 4 different ways we can do this. And number 1 is plan for success. What their research showed was that about 48%, so nearly 50% of hybrid workers are on teams that don't have an informal or formal plan on how to collaborate effectively in this hybrid environment. And so what they realized was that it was really important for organizations to have policies that define, when workers are working at home, what the clear expectations are for remote working. And I know from talking to a number of my colleagues and peers that the great thing about working at home is it does can and does provide some flexibility. And I know a number of people that flex their work schedules in order maybe to accommodate taking the children to school or picking the children up from school at the end of the beginning or end of the day. I've got some colleagues that maybe don't start work till lunchtime, but work later into the evening. Some people are more early birds and would rather get up earlier and work maybe your 8 hours from 5 to 2 or whatever it is. That can provide challenges, because if somebody's emailing you because they're up early and emailing you at 6 o'clock, unless we have some plans and policies and procedures in place, other people on the team might feel pressurized that they need to respond. And that's not the case. It's just people are working in different blocks of time throughout the day. I think this is great because it really actually helps us provide better customer service, because we can actually cover a larger portion of the day. However, it can create these internal challenges if we don't get clear. So it's also important to realize, though, that the policies alone don't foster strong teamwork and organizational cultures. It takes work to get people to interact in the office. It's not purely organic, and structure and planned activity is needed. So we need to have this plan for working together. And this is what helps people know what to expect from each other and also what's expected of them. So it balances the need in an environment where individuals have this autonomy that can overrun the priorities if they aren't explicitly defined, as I just shared. And while half of hybrid workers do not have an agreed upon plan for navigating hybrid teamwork, those who do, the research showed, experienced an improvement in both team collaboration and their own engagement at work. And the statistics were quite compelling. Having a plan for hybrid collaboration resulted in employees being 2.2 times as likely to say their organization's hybrid policy has an extremely positive impact on their team's collaboration. 66% were more likely to be engaged at work and 29% less likely to be burnt. And given some of the challenges that we're facing today in business are around engagement and burn, I think that's very significant. And what the research also revealed was that individual team members were more likely to be without a plan for hybrid collaboration than managers and leaders. So this shows gaps in how hybrid work is arranged throughout the organizations. And It might also be that perhaps people in leadership positions actually have to have a much more organized, orchestrated hybrid plan in order to work together. And I've spoken about previously about something called a team charter, and team charter is what describe as our modus operandi, the way that we're always going to work together. And it also needs to include the missions, goals, and strengths and ways of working together. It's so important that organizations invest some time and energy in looking at their team charter if they've already got it, and if not, creating it and make it relevant to the hybrid workplace. And one of the things that we can do at Business Horsepower here is actually help you create your team charter. So everyone has this clarity on what's going on and what the rules of engagement are. It's like anything. When people don't know what's expected of them, then we get into confusion. And then if we're not careful, that can escalate into chaos. So the second strategy that Gallup was suggesting was coordinating hybrid collaboration. So what should a hybrid teamwork plan include? So some of the things they're recommending are having regular scheduled team check-in meetings. And what the research was showing was about 2/3 of companies that had a way of having a team check-in as one of their best practices had much better collaboration and were able to optimize the way they worked together. And given that majority of the hybrid workers report having this opportunity to connect regularly with team workers, the question then becomes what should be in the team meeting? Because, of course, we're all struggling with an overload of team meetings. And often we've got the wrong people at the wrong meetings. So, really important that we have this clarity about the way to structure the team meeting. And I will signpost and put in the show notes. There is a framework that we've used in the past called the EPIC framework. So, what should teams discuss during these team meetings? One of the things that has also come out of the research is that it was really important to have guidelines on when to be available for work, and also guidelines for communicating your unavailability. And actually, those two things, having that clarity about when people are available and when people aren't available, had the greatest impact on how much team collaboration improved. So I think that's really interesting. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier on about people having different work patterns and everyone knowing what they are. So people don't feel like they need to respond to something which is in their out of work hours that might be somebody else's work hours. And of course, also guidelines are suggested for how often you come to the work on site and what days you need to be on site. And I know from talking to a number of different people that this idea of how many days you go in and how many days you don't go in is really important. I think that I'm seeing a number of companies trying to get certain groups of people together in the office on a set day or days during the week because we know that teams work more effectively through face to face contact. We've got teams that exist today in the workplace where some team members have never met in person. And this is why I'm really passionate about getting teams together and the benefits of actually creating and curating events where we can get everyone in the team together to just to get to know each other. Business is built on relationships. And yet, what we're finding in our hybrid world is that these relationships aren't very strong. Some people really don't know each other. And I think there's also an onus on us, therefore, to really consciously connect with our colleagues who are working remotely. And what does that look like? It means that we need to have these times to check in with people to find out what's going on. The kind of conversations that we would have had that I used to call water cooler talk, where you'd have a conversation with somebody when you were making your coffee or grabbing your lunch in the workplace, and you find out what was going on in another team or what was happening in another person's life. We've not got that informal communication going on. So we really have to consciously think about how can we create that with colleagues in a virtual world. The third way that Gallup is suggesting that you can boost productivity in hybrid teams is to what they call reflect and adapt. And what Gallup are talking about here is that best practices and plans have a limited effect until they become part of the team's routine. And while regular team check ins are often used to coordinate the logistics of hybrid work, teams must also reflect on the lessons learned and how team members can work to get better going forward. So, this is how do we implement best practices? So, there's a need for us to actually take some time out to do a review of what are the best practices, what works, what doesn't work, what can we do differently. And in their research, they discovered that 22% of teams have weekly or monthly discussions about hybrid teamwork. 36% have quarterly or fewer times per year, and only 42% have annual discussions. So, what I would suggest is that we need to have much more frequent, we might even call them like feedback review. What's working? What's not working? How can we do things differently? And the fourth attribute that Gallup recognized was upskilling, because only 21% of hybrid workers have received training on how to work effectively in a hybrid world. And the plans and best practices for elevating teamwork are more effective when organizations teach people how to work differently. So hybrid workers need to individually and collectively learn how to make the most of a hybrid work while adapting to its challenges. So if leaders want hybrid teams to succeed, they must be trained to work together more effectively in this hybrid environment. And this involves upskilling and training and getting training support for managers. And what was very interesting about the research as well was that something we already know, but having an effective manager leads to four times higher employee engagement and well-being. So managers are really important to the dynamics of hybrid working and how engaged and productive our team members feel. So I really do think that there's a real need for us to think about how can we provide opportunities and training for our managers to lead more effectively in a hybrid world, but also how can we start curating experiences where we can actually get all of our team together? That's one of the things that I love to do is create days where we help organizations reset, recalibrate, reimagine teamwork in this hybrid world. And that starts by team members building better relationships between each other, getting to know their colleagues, knowing the strengths and weaknesses of each other, how they can add value, because these are things that sometimes we just implicitly pick up when we're in an environment directly with people. But if we're working remotely and we only ever see effectively one dimension of a team member, we really don't know that much about them. And they might have a load of other skills that are really valuable to the organization that we don't know about. So, as managers and leaders, I think there's a real onus on us to try and get people back together to help drive the energy of the team by people having these better relationships and a better dynamic of working together. But all of this does take conscious thought and leadership. It's not something that's just going to materialize overnight. We really need to spend some time investing in how do we create that team charter so that everyone knows the rules of engagement, and how can we get to build those relationships better. So ultimately, it's up to leaders to make these hybrid teams work. I know of many hybrid teams that can be super effective. I've also know of many that are pretty dysfunctional and not working optimally. And I think there's so many opportunities out there for us to grab the reins and figure out a solution to improve remote working so that we have more collaboration. And for that, I think that comes from better connection between the team members, people understanding each other and building these relationships. And then as a result, we have a much more cohesive team. And as we mentioned it earlier on, more cohesive teams, people are more engaged, they're less burnt out. And ultimately, that's going to drive better productivity and profitability for the business. So my invitation to you this week is to think about, within your hybrid teams, what can you do to improve performance? How can you improve the way that we share information? How can we set some ground rules within the team so everyone knows what's going on in order to get the best out of everyone? So those are just a few thoughts inspired by Gallup on how to create a high-performing hybrid team and boost productivity within that team. I hope you found it useful. And always, we'd love to hear your thoughts about anything that you'd like to share. So until next time, have an amazing week. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favorite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and @Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today? Thanks for listening to the Impactful Teamwork Podcast. Please stay tuned for future episodes and do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating on your favorite platform. Recommendations are essential for attracting new listeners. Please follow us on social media at Julia Felton and @Business Horsepower. And if there are any topics you'd like us to cover on future episodes, please do let me know. Remember, you and your team are always making an impact. What impact will you make today?